So welcome, Rob McCoy, and you're the pastor at Two Rivers United Methodist Church in downtown Rock Island, and you have your own podcast called Pulpit Fiction, and people can find you online at Fat Pastor on Facebook and Instagram. And do you do like TikTok and all that stuff?
I don't do TikTok.
Okay.
I miss the TikTok. I'm a lurker on TikTok, but
okay.
Yeah,
and I'm so glad that you're here today, and thank you so much for joining me on the Rock Island line.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's an honor. I love the show, and the people that you've talked to are such interesting, amazing people. It's great to be part of that lineup. I'm honored.
It's fun to realize how many cool, wonderful people there are in our community. You feel better just about the world and life and all that stuff.
Yeah, and again, listening to your show has been great because I'm making all these connections in my mind. Like, oh, I know, Dr. Williams talking about school, and my wife's a teacher, and I know Adam and the work he's doing with clock, and I know Laura, like Nest, did stuff at our church. Like it's just been fun, like making all these connections of all the amazing stuff that's happening in Rock Island and the area.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so with every episode, we start off with, from whence did your journey with Rock Island begin? Where's your Rock Island story start?
So I was appointed in the United Methodist Church. It's an appointment system. So we have a bishop that sort of oversees where people go. So I kind of get deployed where they tell me. And I was appointed to Rock Island in 2014. I was actually the associate pastor in Moline for 3 years before that. So I've been in the Quad Cities since 2011, and I've been the pastor at Two Rivers for just starting my 12th year.
Wow. I didn't know if you guys had always lived here because I mean, this is the first time we've met, but I followed you on different social medias. I followed your wife. And so I didn't know if you guys were like a forever Rock Island family or, so where did you live before coming to Rock Island?
So I grew up in Schaumburg. Like, as someone joked the other day, I was talking about, I grew up in the suburbs, and they said, which one? I said, Schaumburg. And they said, oh, the suburb. But like Schaumburg and Naperville, I like the two big. But anyway, yeah, so I grew up in Schaumburg. My wife grew up in a little town called Fairbury, Illinois, and we met at Illinois Wesleyan in Bloomington. After that, we lived I did some graduate work at SIU Edwardsville for a little while. We lived in Peoria for a couple of years. Then we moved back to St. Louis to do seminary. And then I was appointed in Chenoa, which is another small town near Bloomington. And then Moline. So we've been most of my adult life has been in central Illinois.
What years were you in St. Louis?
2003 through 6.
That's so funny. So were we.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So we were in St. Louis from 2004 to like 2006.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we would have been living in St. Louis at the same time. Did you live downtown or midtown?
So we lived like just south of the park, off of Hampton, kind of near the hill.
Which park?
Forest Park.
Forest Park. Okay.
Yeah.
We lived by Tower Grove Park on Kings Highway in Arsenal.
Yeah, Tower Grove Park was actually closer. So we were on Hampton, like just south of the hill.
Okay, so we were
So
probably...
yeah, we were within a couple miles. I mean, we played tennis at Tower Grove Park.
Yeah, we probably lived really close to each other in the same...
Absolutely.
And when did you have your children?
So we had children then when we moved to Chenoa. So Sarah actually got pregnant like right at the end of my seminary time. We graduated and then got appointed to Chenoa. So Ellie was born in Normal, Illinois, at the hospital in Normal when we were living in a little town called Chenoa.
Yeah. So you kind of moved to Rock Island with the family, and your kids were already, I mean, how old? So they would have been little ones, but...
Yeah, so Ellie was second grade. So she started in the Rock Island schools in second grade. And then Lucy just has been only in the Rock Island school. So I think she wasn't a kindergarten. I think the next year she was a kindergartner. So she's been in the Rock Island schools her whole life. And then Ellie just graduated Rock Island High School. And Lucy's a sophomore there.
And I heard your oldest wants to go into journalism.
Yeah. She's about to leave. I've been on the brink of tears for the last couple of weeks. Like anything can tip me off because she's going to go to college. And I'm okay with it. I'm excited, but it's that like, oh my gosh. She's going to DePaul.
In Chicago.
Yeah, in about a week. And we're super excited for her. She did the yearbook a lot at Rock Island High School. She took journalism 3 years in a row with Mrs. Venz and just loved Rock Island High School, loved Mrs. Venz in particular, and loved working on the yearbook and doing that kind of stuff. And so she's going to go do sports journalism, communications.
That's so awesome. Again, I kind of feel like a stalker because we've never met. And I'm like, I know a lot about your child. I'm like, and she seems like such a cool kid. And just, you can see like her trajectory of being involved in the world and going out there to tell stories. And I think that's amazing.
And that's exactly it. It's the storytelling. And that's where, my background before I went into ministry was journalism. I was going to be a sports writer, right? Mm-hmm. That was in college, I wrote a sports column every week. I wanted to tell stories. I'm a writer at heart. And the path of ministry kind of happened afterwards, but that storytelling, and it's still most of what I do. I think that's what religion and spirituality is storytelling, really. Storytelling in the world and like making meaning from what's going on in the world. And that's understanding that the stories we tell, the way we tell them, can actually have an impact on hearts and lives and change lives is a powerful thing to realize. And it's been fun watching her discover that because it's always been a part of my life.
Yeah, that's so cool. You're passing it down to her through her, watching you probably and valuing what you do and taking on some of that for her own identity. And that's pretty powerful. Yeah. So what was it like to come to the Quad Cities and then to settle in Rock Island? Had you heard about Rock Island before? Was it something?
Not really, no. I mean, we knew so my wife went to Augustana for a trimester. So she started at Augustana and transferred immediately. Went home from Thanksgiving and didn't come back. And there was a lot of reasons. It wasn't because of rock. It was a lot of reasons. And we joked that it was because she had to transfer to Wesleyan to meet me. But I'm not much of a predestination kind of person, but it's a good joke. So she knew it much more than I did. I don't know if I'd ever. I'm a big high school sports fan, so I think I knew of Moline and Rock Island. I'd heard of the towns, but I knew very little about it.
So when you got deployed here and they were like, "This is where you're going," what was it like to move here, to create a life here? What were your impressions of this place?
Well, one thing, we got really lucky in that we had a built-in friend. So my best friend from seminary, who I do my podcast with, we do Pulpit Fiction together. Eric is an Augustana grad. We met in seminary in St. Louis. We were already really good friends, and his sister lives here in Rock Island. So like, we kind of knew them, but not really well. But like when we moved in, we like already had some family like connection, and now they're like our best friends in the world, and we're like our chosen family. So we kind of got lucky in that aspect. But then it's just a matter of, we've loved and still do, the history that's here. I'm a history major. I like, it's such an old town. There's so much tradition. I was the 25th graduating class of my high school. And then I went to a game at Wharton Fieldhouse and was like, this was an NBA arena. And then we went to a Rocky game and it was like, there's a banner hanging on the rafters that said like state champions or, runners up in like 1902. And I'm like, I went to a 25-year-old school and I come here and they're playing basketball with the Wright brothers.
Yes.
The history is so cool. I love that. So
yeah, I think the football stadium was built as part of a project after the Great Depression, I think.
Yeah, well, I've heard that it was going to be an NFL stadium. It was going to be the Independence, but then
I think the Douglas Park is where the first NFL baseball, I don't know, sports.
Yeah,
the first NFL football game was ever played, which is pretty amazing. Yeah. But yeah, so you can tell that even just the indigenous people who lived here prior to, people from my family immigrating from Sweden. And it does feel like this land has so much history.
Yeah. And you mentioned the indigenous side of things. That's something I'm been more mindful of in the last couple of years. And I was doing some research about our church's history and, Two Rivers Church it was called First Methodist for a long time. It was just Old First. And we've had the claim that it was the first church in Rock Island County. And we've done some studies, and it was started in like Mrs. Spencer's cabin, right? Spencer is such a name around here, Spencer Towers. And Spencer, and I'm like, that's so cool. It was the first church and, 1833. And like, that's really neat. That's something to be proud of. Like, we've got these deep roots. And then I was doing some more research and like studying 1833. Yeah.
Whoa.
So now the building wasn't there. Like, it started as a group of people. The building, was built, I should have looked this up. I feel like in the 1890s.
Still, that's like a long time ago.
As a community of faith, it's the oldest one. And yet, so that's this cool, like, anchoring history. Then I was doing more research about the Native American peoples and about Black Hawk, and was like, yeah, the Black Hawk War and like the expulsion of Black Hawk happened in 1833. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, oh, yeah, this church was planted like immediately after the Native Americans were expelled. And, Black Hawk War wasn't really a war. It was more of a massacre, right? And so, yeah,
I think
so it's like
I wrote a little bit about that in the first article I did on my website, and it was about the population change in Rock Island over time. So it started when they had calculated like how many Native Americans lived here, and it was something like 7,000. And then I forget the exact years, but it was like in the 1830s it dropped down to the population being like 400 or something. And then, it built back up. But so the church was maybe founded in that era where there was a big mass shift in the demographics of who lived in Rock Island.
It was an occupation, right? I mean, and from what I've read, they basically, a lot of settlers, like when natives were out hunting on their expeditions, the settlers came in and just sort of took their homes. Right? So there's this history, and I'm not a historian in that sense, but like...
Well, it was a different, because I've read that too, that back then in indigenous cultures, there was like migration because you would move where food was, you would move up and down the river, you would move, and you had areas that you would return to, but it wasn't like, I own this piece of land and now it's mine, all seasons, all weathers, so there were these opportunities when people would migrate for different hunting and gathering purposes. Our, people who came here were like, no, I'm planting my flag here and this property's now mine, like finders, keepers.
So that's the sort of, right, we've got these deep roots that is really cool, but then the reality of, oh, well, how did that actually happen, right? Let's tell that story too and realize that maybe it's a complicated history, right? It's not just this triumphalism. We started a church and here we are still today. Oh, there's a deeper history there. And anyway, I think in general in history of a community, of a area, I'm fascinated by it. And I think it's so rich here in particular. And not just that kind of history, but just like there's things in the Quad Cities that we've loved that are like just Quad Cities things, right? Like I've never lived in a community that had like its own chain of restaurants, like Rudy's or Village Inn or Hungry Hobo. These are like Quad Cities
Harris
chains,
Pizza.
Right? I mean, now I don't like all of them. I'm not a big fan of Rudy's, but like some of these things, I really do like you don't go to, I lived in Peoria. There wasn't like a chain of restaurants that were just Peoria or, in the suburbs, everything's the same, right? Like, so the uniqueness is always fascinated us too. So we really we're not lifelong Rock Islanders, but we have really adopted it as our home, and we really do love Rock Island in particular. It's been a lot of fun.
What do you think is kind of quintessential Rock Island, or why do you like Rock Island? And having moved here and maybe visited other cities to eat or have fun, or why do you like being in Rock Island specifically?
I've always said, and I got to do the recount now because it's changed, but for a long time I told people Rock Island has 3 independent coffee shops and no Starbucks. And I liked that. Mm-hmm. Right now we're down to 2.
What do we have? Awake,
and Holy Grinds are the 2 that I think of.
And then there's
now.
just the little drive-through Cool Beans, but it's not.
I think the drive-through closed.
Oh, it closed?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Cool Beans was my office for like 10 years. I've probably spent, when it was open, I spent more time at Cool Beans, got to know Annette, got to know so many of the workers there. I loved Cool Beans. But yeah, and Theo's, I used to love Theo's, and it's came and went and gone again. So, I mean, there's that difficult part of things, but there's still the sort of independent spirit, entrepreneurial spirit, sort of, I don't know, chip on the shoulder might be too much, but that kind of like,
I don't
we're
think
here,
it's too much.
we're here, and you might not like it, but screw you. We like it here, you know? And that's kind of how I feel. I've liked that sort of, a little bit of a grit.
Yeah. I had texted you this or emailed when we were kind of getting this scheduled, but lately I have this idea, and since you're a pastor, I'm going to ask you. But where would Jesus live if he had to pick a quad city? You know, there's the bracelet that's like, what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
And I often think,
what should I say? Well, Jesus lives in each of our hearts.
Okay, that's a better answer. But let's say he had to pick a city to live in.
I would say,
because I think Jesus would live in Rock Island.
Yeah, I mean, Century Woods, right? I mean, I love the work that you've been doing. It's interesting, and I don't know if we want to get into that too much, but like, I think Jesus would live amongst the immigrants, the refugees. I mean, he was a refugee. Like literally part of Jesus' story is that he survived because he was a refugee. I think he would live walking amongst, folks at Schwiebert Park. I think he would live with people, right? And like, I don't know, I'm not a realtor, so I don't know, but I think he would.
If you were Jesus's realtor, what would you?
Yeah, I mean, the grittiness of Rock Island and the diversity and the incredible mix of people and creativity and artistry and I think this would be a good fit for him.
Because I don't really go to church. I mean, I grew up going to church, to St. John's Lutheran Church, which is a beautiful, wonderful place. But I think for a lot of people in my generation, the idea of religion, and there's so much like hypocrisy in it, and the stories can be twisted to meet people's aim. Like, the thing I liked most about church was, and I'll still cry. Every time I go to church, I feel like I cry because my dad would sing all the hymns at full volume. And I just grew up, my dad every Sunday would say, "This is the day the Lord hath made, rejoice and be glad in it." So it's kind of cultural. Like, you grow up with these, I'm Lutheran, I'm Swedish, all that. My grandma sang hymns. So there's a big part of it that feels like family. And my parents still go and they take my kids. And there was so much of it. I mean, when I first read the Bible, I read it with a highlighter and was like judging it the whole time. Like, and in Christianity, that isn't as encouraged as it is in other faith traditions.
Certain kinds of Christianity.
Or certain kinds of Christianity.
Because I can tell you can bring your highlighter and you can ask the questions and you can struggle with it. I mean, I'm doing, when we get together on Mondays for our Bible study at noon, we ask hard questions. And then I'll point to the, there's two creation stories and they don't match up. Stories are important, and stories and fact aren't the same thing. Historicity of something doesn't make a story less true or powerful or valuable. And I think people hear the word story and they think, well, that's just a story. It must not be that important. But the stories we tell and the stories we keep telling of triumph and overcoming and grace and generosity, if those are the stories you tell over and over again, if you tell stories of justice and resistance, those are important stories to tell. Now, did they happen exactly the way described all the time? I'm willing to wonder. I'm willing to question some of that.
Yeah.
But the power of the story is not in the historical exactness, the objective, certainly not in the objective science, right? There's no science in the Bible. But I think those stories, we read in our church, when we read scripture, after they're done, we say, this is the story of God's love for the people God loves. And people say, thanks be to God. And that's the response, because to me, that's what the Bible is. Now, that's also, there's some stories there when we say the story of God's love. Really? Like, was that a story of love? But it's our job then to find it.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I think that's been really interesting for my husband and I, because he actually went to your church when he was a little boy, and so like we sent our oldest to confirmation, and then she'd come home and be like, well, today we read a story about how God got upset with everyone, so he just wiped out the entire population and like started over. It's like, and so I've always told my kids, like my favorite part of church was being with my parents, in this and just the funerals and weddings, and it becomes part of your culture, and just this experience of family. But then I remember, Jesus, like that was the best part of the Bible or any story you read. It would always be like, well, what is Jesus doing? Because that stuff makes sense to me. But there was a lot in the Bible that never made sense to me, like the wrath of God and some of that stuff. I was like, I don't get it. And then I think as you grow up and when I was in high school and stuff, God was all about love. And even my parents' church, that is very much like God is love and tolerance and kindness and acceptance. And but in our society, it seems like the role of Christianity has just taken on these, it's like you have like crunchy Christians, you have very conservative Christians who say that those stories kind of some of the stories in the Bible might support the fact that they're kind of supreme to everyone else, or I don't know. It's real confusing, Rob. And I think it must be hard for modern day pastors to get people to come and to, ground your life in a kind of a structure like that. And, but yeah, is it hard to be like a Christian pastor in today's landscape, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to be. There's an old quote, I always misquote it, but it's like, Christianity has not been tried and found wanting. It's been found too difficult and not tried. And the idea is there's so many Christianities out there. And I don't want to say, no, that's not the real Christianity, because I don't want to neglect the real harm that's been done, the real... but what I want to do is lift up. There's another faith. We talk a lot about the last few years, ex-evangelical movement or deconstruction and these kinds of things. I'm not that much into deconstruction as it is. I want to build something. When I think about theology and religion and faith and spirituality, I want to build something that's beautiful. My understanding of God, my understanding of Christ, my understanding of the Holy Spirit, my understanding of the Bible, that through the lens of Jesus, right, through the lens of love, that is liberative, that resists oppression, that is prophetic. When you talk about vengeance, the vengeance of God, most of the time what God is angry about is injustice, right? The prophets were really mad, but they were really mad at the rich and powerful that were harming the orphan and the alien and the widow, right? Not always. Some of it was just war and occupation, and we need to deal with that. But when I talk about building something, I want to build a theology that starts with a loving God, includes the teachings of Jesus that are about the kingdom of God, the generosity and compassion and community. I want to build a church theology on coming to a place where you can lament, where you can complain, where you can not be okay, where we can talk about mental health and abuse and ask big questions, hard questions. That's the theology I want to build, and I think that's a strong. And then I found if you build that and you root your Bible knowledge in historical context and cultural awareness and all of these things, if you build that kind of theology, then the other theologies that I think are flimsy because they don't respond to tough questions very well, they don't respond to real life very well, to tragedy very well, those things crumble. Now, some people really cling to them, right? People cling to easy answers. They cling to black and white. They cling to an understanding of God and faith. And it's not just Christianity, because fundamentalism runs through a lot of faith. And I'd say possibly through, Stalin was atheist too, right? So like there's violent fundamentalisms that poison a lot of belief systems. But if you can hold on to, I lost my train of thought now.
Well, you were just kind of talking about building this structure that would underpin.
Yeah. So if you build something that's solid, then when the challenges of, people cling to easier answers, and they cling to systems of faith that present very much an otherness, an us against them understanding of the world. When you have that so strong, this us and them, then the them can be dehumanized, and the them can be, exploited, and the them, and then the scary thing and the really powerful thing is the themness, the dehumanization then in my heart is godly ordained, and that's really terrifying. Right? And so what I want to do is give people another way. There's another way of believing, and there's another way of being faithful, and there's another way of spirituality. And I would say, yes, there's another way of doing religion that is not that sort of cling to black and white, us and them kind of ways of thinking that can be really destructive.
And I think that probably we need more than ever community. And churches forever served as this kind of place to get together and to be with other people, and having lost that, I think it's hard, because when you are struggling, it's like just me, I'm just me trying to figure this out through more of me. And that can be really challenging. And I think a belief system, whether you develop it through a church or a synagogue or, it helped. I mean, for me, a lot of my spirituality as an adult came through getting sober. And I went through a program where they were like, okay, you got to believe in something bigger than yourself. And I was like, I don't know what that is for me at, in my early 20s. And so building up that spirituality is feeling like you're nestled in something larger than yourself, that there's some benevolence to the universe, that there is goodness. And I do like the Buddha and Jesus and these examples of like, what does it look like to live your life that way? Or to...
Yeah, I think there's a decision people make about God very early on, not whether God is or isn't. That obviously is important, but even if you understand that there is a God, one of the most basic questions then is God a loving, benevolent God that's seeking healing and grace, or is God a God of justice and punishment and wanting everyone to act a certain way, right? And very broad brushstrokes, a loving God or a judging God. God of love and grace or God of justice. Now, it's not an either or, because to love is justice and love, I think, are closely related. But if you see God as, and this has been studied, there's a guy named Mike McCargue, known as Science Mike, but he's a ex-evangelical, digs a lot into some scientific stuff, and I'm doing a sermon series right now on a book called the Finding God in the Waves. And he talks about like literal brain scans of, there's different parts of the brain, and it's dangerous for me to tread into this too much because I'm very amateurish, but there's parts of the brain that control like fear and fight or flight, right? And then there's parts of the brain that control like empathy and deeper thought. And people that hold on to this judgmental God ready to strike you down, that can serve a purpose. Like fear can be a strong motivator. It can keep you in line. It can keep you from doing some things that you shouldn't do. But ultimately, it also feeds your fear and anxiety, and it changes the way you understand the world. It changes the way you understand other people. It gives you a hermeneutic of suspicion, of distrust, a lens of I've got to fear this thing, this person, this idea, this concept. But if you've got a more an understanding of God that's loving and graceful and yearning for invitation, that shifts the way you think about the world too, right? That means that I can be curious. I can learn, I can grow, right? And it, according to him and some of these studies, that they've literally done brain scans where people that live in a fearful God have more activity of that amygdala fight or flight response, as opposed to people that understand God as a loving God, have thicker gray matter and like deeper connections and things like empathy and compassion grow. And it's a fascinating thing. And I'm not, don't hear me say, if people that do not believe in God, I think they can be absolutely compassionate and generous. And I don't think that a belief in God is the only way to being a good person. I'm not like that. I mean, frankly, some of my atheist friends, I think I have more common and more values with than some people that I might claim siblinghood in Christ with, because of where the rubber hits the road. But this division between how you understand God then changes how you interact, how you see the world. And sometimes it comes down to the difference between seeing somebody and being curious or seeing somebody and being fearful. You know, I love your conversation, this last week with Christy about the third place. I think of Ted Lasso. Right? It's like one of my favorite shows ever. Be curious, right? Curiosity is such an important part of faith to me.
Yeah.
And life in general. But curiosity, people talk love over fear. Absolutely, sure. I think curiosity over fear might even be more important.
I think that's so true. And again, like as an adult, you know, I had my faith of childhood and then my spirituality, faith of adulthood. And it always came through curiosity, question asking. And I think I'm more in the camp of benevolence and love, and almost like if you had a radio that you were trying to find the right station. And when you're filled with fear and anxiety and kind of a lot of almost occupied with self, in a self-centered way. Not that that's bad, but just, you know, anxiety, even like, what am I going to do about this? What am I going to do about that? What are these people doing? You know, that feels like the radio station's all fuzzy. And that sometimes in life you have these moments where it just feels clear. And usually that's this feeling of openness and curiosity and calm. And a big part of my journey as an adult has been trying to tap into that and doing that through a sense of faith or belief in something bigger than myself. Or because in the periods where I believed in kind of nothing, you know, it was hard. Like, it's hard to believe in nothing. I feel for the people who, you know, my husband's kind of agnostic and he's just chill though. So maybe it's like when your life goes really wrong and then you really need faith to kind of pull you through that. I'm really rambling. I'm not articulate talking about religion or God or any of that stuff. But, and
that's okay. Like, you don't have to be like.
Yeah. My dad used to say when I was little, because he was Lutheran, like my grandma on his side would literally be like, ask us regularly, have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal savior? And you know, by the time before she had died, I almost was encouraged to I wanted to lie to her because I didn't want her dying thinking that I wouldn't get to see her again. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, and so I'd say, I love Jesus, Grandma. And I want to live like Jesus. But I don't believe he's the only way to get to heaven, because that means kids in other countries who are starving to death and never heard his name, I don't believe they're going to hell. And my grandma was super cool. She'd kind of get into it with you. But my dad also read the Tao. And so he went through this phase where, you know, he was quoting the Tao all the time. And he would say, those who say don't know, those who know don't say. And this kind of, you know, you can kind of feel it when you're like, oh, that's God or whatever my God is. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it just, I think, is helpful in this world to also rest in a perspective of there is something bigger at work than just you and your little being, justice and whatever that is. You don't have to exact it all either, because something bigger is at play here. And this could just be like a tiny window of what we experience. And so I kind of believe in everything. I'm like karma, energy, astrology, Jesus, the Buddha.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, church is the place where you can come together and just be in that community.
Yeah.
Right? We're not going to line up all our, there's a lot of overlap, but we're not like, this isn't a set of things that you have to believe to come into, to enter into. There's no list of, there's some fundamental truth that we might share, but it's an invitation to come in conversation all the time. And when, for me, weekly worship gathering like that, it provides some regularity, some structure in life. You know what's coming, you know what's there. You have prayers that are familiar. There is a depth in knowing that we're going to read something that's been read for 2,000 years, right? We're going to sing a song that's been sung for generations. There's a connectivity, in time that we're gathering in this place that has been a place where infants have been baptized and people have been married and people have died. But also it's a place where people have struggled. And to be honest, that it's also been a place that has done harm. And let's be real about that. There have been people harmed by Christianity, by the church, by exclusive understandings, by what I've come to realize are misreadings of the scripture. You talk about, women who were trapped in abusive relationships for so long, under the misreading of, you need, this is a cross that you shall bear, right? Or, submitting to your husband, or these kinds of things. There are atrocities of race and racism that are built into American Christianity in particular, that were built on systems of less than. There are parts of the Bible that you can point to support slavery and all sorts of oppressions. There has been great harm done to LGBTQ people for who they love, right? And I don't want to excuse any of that. I want to speak to it and say, yes, this has happened. But again, I'm building something else, right? So I want to build a theology and an understanding of the Bible. And some people say, well, you're cherry picking. I'm like, well, guess what? Everybody does. There's nobody that doesn't cherry pick the Bible. So you can either discount it all, which I get. If people have turned away from it, I understand. But I'm actually honest about it. So I'm going to build something that is, because you might point to wives submit to your husbands, but I'm going to point to mutually submit and love each other with mutual submission, right? You might point to, women shouldn't speak up in church, but I'm going to point to Paul calling women apostles. You might point to a Leviticus saying, a woman should not lie, or a man should not lie with a man. But I'm going to point to the Ethiopian eunuch, who was other in every way, in race, by sex, by gender, by everything. And yet, when he said, what prevents me from being baptized, the answer was nothing.
Well, and isn't it probably true that as all those books were being put together to be the Bible, there's stories from all sorts of different people and prophets, and I'm like an idiot about this stuff. And I mean, if you think about someone going through the Smithsonian right now to say, here's the history we're going to include, and here's the history that we won't, or ChatGPT deciding which articles to highlight and which ones not to. I mean, we're human still. So back then there must have been some process of what do we include, what do we exclude, who has power here, who has influence. And so aren't there like chapters probably of the Bible and different stuff that could have been included that was more female empowerment and that was maybe cut out? Or is that like,
yeah, no, you actually
thing?
See, there's a development in the New Testament that you actually see over time, in Paul's letters especially, that if you really dig into okay, we're going to get into some weeds here, if that's okay.
Yeah.
If you get into Paul's letters, right? So Romans, Thessalonians, Corinthians, Ephesians, a lot of these are attributed to Paul. First and Second Timothy. Some of them are to specific communities. Some of them are to individuals. And what a lot of scholars, and this is disputed, but most scholars that I pay attention to, that I give credence to, have realized that Paul's earliest letters, First Thessalonians is one of them, but then there's other letters that are called pseudo-Paul that were written under his name, but probably by his students, and happened later. And so what you have even in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they were written at different times. Mark, probably in order, Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, in that order of writing. You see theology develop even within the Bible. Mark is the most bare bones, like the least theology is in Mark. John is the last written, and it's full of theology, right? It's full of deep philosophical talks and conversations that you don't have in Mark. And so over time, things developed. Paul's letters, his early ones, are all about community. And even when he says some things that you kind of look sideways at, his ultimate point is we need each other. We need to build up community. It starts with a prayer. I'm thankful for you. These are some things you're messing up, but ultimately we're all in this together. You need to love one another. But then you get into some of the later Paul, and as the church grew, as it became more and more difficult, these very liberative understandings of race and class and gender, which we still struggle with, right? When the liberative parts of Christianity started to lift people up and disrupt communities and upset the apple cart, so to speak, and upset commerce and upset, and it became more and more difficult to live as a people of equality and liberation in the Roman Empire that was very hierarchical and very structured and very attuned to power structures and falling in line. When the Christian church started to upset some of that, that's when you see 1st, 2nd Timothy, which are two of the more oppressive letters, right? It's like, you got to get back to, we've got to keep this going, but you're going too far, right? And so you see, even within the Bible, you see development. And that's not even to mention the extra canonical writings that were inspired by Christ, right? Got Gnostic Gospels and all sorts of other things. Yes, there was a whole process of canonization that took place over time in community. It's not as sometimes people caricaturize and be like a bunch of powerful guys got together and cut everything out. It wasn't that clean and simple, but it did happen over time, over centuries.
Yeah, I don't even understand when the Bible was written or when the stories were written, but I know my daughter is doing, she's doing AP history at Rocky right now. So they're starting right now. She was just reading about the Salem witch trials, and her question was to kind of look at how do the Salem witch trials sit in the context of everything going on in New England at that time. And a lot of it is about religion and people with different ideas kind of using religion to kind of quiet. Most of those were women who owned land. And so I don't know. I also feel like this is so interesting because at a national level, there's been lately this instinct to erase some of our history, to not look at stuff that is conflictual or painful, or almost even in doing this podcast, I want to talk about all the positive stuff with Rock Island. But obviously, not everything is going to be positive, and kind of this wanting to look away from anything that's hard or makes us have to feel bad for a second, or makes us have to reflect. And so I think I love how your church's approach of let's get together, let's talk about this, let's ask the hard questions, let's look at what these guys were discussing in these chapters of the Bible and how that might relate to how modern day humans are discussing. And you have one group that's more liberal, and one group that there's a swing to that, and it's no, now Timothy's got to get super oppressive, and kind of how we're still peopling, and we're so imperfect, and it's so messy, and people who are in power get to lay down history in a way, or maybe someday robots will just do it. I don't know, but it's so fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, and I think all of the Bible you've got to read from the perspective of this is stories for people that were not powerful. Nothing written in the Bible was written by somebody very powerful. because Israel was always a very small kingdom in between mega superpowers, Assyria, Egypt. The early Christians were operating under Rome, under an imperial culture of, controlling the bread and circuses, and, the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome was great, and it helped, build roads and made the Colosseum a great place to gather, and they had great shows and great football games there. Gladiator fights there, right? But it also meant any kind of resistance was met with crushing violence, right? And so the early Christianity was all about trying to build community under the constant threat of annihilation, right? And so today, Christianity has co-opted power in so many ways, right? Christians are not under oppression in America, in the United States. Like, making somebody bake a cake is not martyrdom, right? Buying a cup at Starbucks that says Happy Holidays is not martyrdom, right? Like, Christians are really good at getting riled up and thinking everything is oppression. In fact, Christianity is incredibly powerful right now. Our whole calendar, so much of the world is structured to accommodate Christianity. But is there an understanding of, but then there's little churches, and I'm not saying we're like some great shining example of pure Christianity, but if Christianity is not resisting oppression, if it's not advocating for justice, if it's not welcoming the immigrant and the widow and the marginalized, if the church isn't working for the marginalized, it shouldn't exist. The marriage of power and Christianity is one of the great failures of the church over the last. You can go to Constantine, or you can go to the religious right in the 60s. You can point to lots of different points in history when the church gets wed with political and economic power. It ceases to be the church of a peasant carpenter who was executed for treason.
Yeah. That's, I think, what turned me off from Christianity. And I have Christians in my family who I love as human beings, but I'm like, is that Christianity? Like, it seems very much, if I'm doing so well, it must be because God really loves me and wants me to keep all of this. And people who don't have this, almost like God must not love them. And that's why they are struggling so much. And it just, in my mind, like the things I heard growing up in church or the things my parents told me about Jesus, it's just, they don't match up. And so, because there's kind of like we have like Christian leadership right now at a national level.
No, we don't.
Well, it doesn't feel Christian, but that's how it's talked about.
No,
it's
I know.
God and power.
Yeah.
And God gives us power.
Yeah.
The power to harm people.
Yeah. Yeah. And what the power of God and the power of Christ was love and compassion, right? The power of Jesus was highest exemplified when he allowed himself to be crucified, right? When he was executed by the empire. When the empire did the worst they could, right? They did the thing when Jesus loved and built community and provided bread, right? That's Rome's job. When he provided, when he healed, no, that's somebody else's job, right? When he welcomed women and children, I don't know if we should be treating them on the same standards. When he crossed national borders and went into Samaria and told stories about foreigners that were actually good people, wait a second, that's not what we should be doing, right? These are the things that he did. He was executed for treason, right?
Jesus is such a badass.
Right. And what resurrection is to me is saying empire threw everything they had. They tried to torture him, and not just kill him, but annihilate him, present in a system of honor and shame. Crucifixion was the worst shame you could give to somebody, And Jesus wasn't the only one. I mean, thousands of people were crucified under Rome. Thousands of Jews were crucified under Rome. And it was done. It wasn't muscular Jesus laid out, with a six-pack and a nice loincloth to protect himself. It was much more brutal than that, much more shameful, much more naked, right? And all of these things were to produce so much shame that nobody would even claim him. Nobody would claim to be his disciple after something like that. And what resurrection is, to me, is all these things that Jesus taught led to this horrible, assertion of imperial violence. But resurrection means, nope, that's not the end of the story. That power, the power of violence and hatred and fear, gets overcome on the third day, right? And in the meantime, there's some struggle. There's mourning. The scars are there. The pain is still real. But ultimately, there's something that wins. There's a victory here. And so when I think about that, and I tell that story, I think that's a story worth telling over and over again. Because today, when we're resisting oppressive governments or resisting a creep of fascism that is scaring a lot of people, when we see people, families divided and houselessness criminalized and compassion criminalized, we need to keep telling this story that, the violence of empire, whether it be Roman Empire or American Empire, that kind of violence doesn't have the last word. And so what we try to do is build a community that honors and respects and lifts up and empowers as much as we can.
Makes me emotional.
Yeah.
Just listening to you.
See, so hearing that story every week, hearing the story of love wins, because there's so many other messages, there are so many other stories out there. We get bombarded with so many horror stories. If we can gather and get together and tell this story instead, and sing these songs instead, and greet each other with peace instead, maybe that's gonna, some people call that the opiate of the masses, right? Okay. I need some painkiller. Because there's a lot of pain. But it's not just painkiller. It's what it should be doing is inspiring us then. And I think about our church.
Or it could be more like how they say trees have a network that's invisible underneath them.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like one of my deepest religious experiences was watching Avatar. I love Avatar. I love that movie. And just maybe when all those people are together, kind of doubling down on love, doubling down on interconnectedness, I think maybe we are connected in some way that we can't see. Like your hand, if you put your hand under a table and your 5 fingers were on top of the table, you'd see it as 5 distinct things, but that we are interconnected and feel each other's pain and feel each other's joy. And so being in that space and having that a bunch of people together exuding, like the Care Bears, holding hands and shooting love out of their hearts.
Yeah, and that's fuel for resistance. That's fuel for hope. Hope is an incredibly powerful thing. And I think for me, the best way of having hope is to keep getting together and telling each other we have hope. And it's not some sort of, pie in the sky idealistic understanding. Because if you're not also then doing the work of advocacy, of, showing up at meetings, showing up at marches, opening up our kitchen to feed people, if you're not also doing those things, then it's empty, right? Then it is just sort of, let's get together and feel good about each other. But I think about churches, and it's our church, and it's not just us, because I know St. John's, I know there are what we call the affirming congregations of the Quad Cities.
And is that something you were part of starting?
Yeah.
Or started?
Yeah. I mean, I helped get it going, helped get the ball rolling to say, but there have been other leaders in this area. Rich Hendricks at Metropolitan Community Churches has been doing this work for a lot longer than me. St. John's has been a church that's been open and affirming for a lot longer. But these congregations basically were saying now, like, it's not just this understanding of God and this understanding that affirms LGBTQ people, that embraces immigrants and diversity and wants to advocate for justice in the world. This is not some sort of small niche thing, right? There's other Christianities there are other elements of Christianity that are much louder and much more dominant, but we're not just some small group of, liberal, woke, this is, and we're not just, I think we're tapping into something much more ancient in the ancient mothers and fathers that that were not about the exclusive clinging to power, but instead we're about embracing an openness, a universal Christ, a universal openness, a universal generosity, a gentleness of spirit that is much more ancient than the sort of modern, highly politicized, very angry, very powerful thing that happened. Honestly, if you dig into some history, a lot of it happened in the 60s as a response to the civil rights movement, which was fueled in large part by churches. I mean, Martin Luther King was a pastor first.
Yeah.
Right? Was also resisted by a lot of churches, so I don't want to pretend that wasn't real. But when white Christians started to be fearful that they were losing their power, they found allies in Richard Nixon, and they found allies in Jerry Falwell, and they made these alliances that found a couple really important topics that would get to people's emotions and
drive a wedge. Yeah, kind of using division
and fear.
Yeah. Have you ever read Paradise Lost?
No.
Okay. I had to write a paper on it in high school. And Mr. Milton, if he's listening, he gave me a B+, and it meant that I wasn't the valedictorian. And I'm still, but I thought I wrote like the best paper ever, because it's like the angel falls, and it's I don't believe in hell. Like, I just don't. I do not believe in hell at all. But that this idea that hell could be actually what we are right now. It's like maybe a representation of the furthest separated from love and connection and whatever I imagine God to feel like, that when we're human, like, we are the most separated. And so that was my concept of hell. Like, nobody goes to hell. We're probably living in it, and it's some sort of not a test, but like, how do you do in hell? Like, because you're the most disconnected. You can be filled with fear and pain, and so many human emotions are so difficult to deal with. But I see that as like separation from God, is like human fear of another human. That's got to be the feeling of being very separated from God, because I don't think God would fear any human. Or I don't know. Maybe that doesn't make sense, but
no, I mean, there's so many understandings of hell that are varied, and
I mean, we don't have to talk about hell. I just think what's worse than
when Jesus talked about
someone else must be what hell feels like.
I mean, one of the things, absolutely. Like, separation from love is hell.
Yes.
Right? And I don't think you have to invent some mystical, magical place of torture to imagine what hell is, because you can experience it when any of our cities, right? I mean, in neighborhoods and homes, in people's own heart. When you experience, that kind of isolation and exclusion is a form of hell. Deep, deep poverty, when that kind of lingering suffering, that kind of pain is a hell. You don't need to invent something. I've told people, and I've preached it. I mean, the idea of heaven and hell, if I was going to list 100 things of why I follow Christ, I don't think heaven and hell would make the list.
Yeah.
Right? I have very little concern about what happens after I die. Yeah. Eternal punishment or eternal reward is not, because if you're just doing things to be rewarded or to avoid punishment, then why are you doing it? Right? That's not That's the fearful God that's going to punish. And it can work. It can keep people in line.
Yeah.
But that's not a loving embrace. That's not a vulnerability. That's not a real relationship. Right? I follow Christ because Christ has compelled me and strengthened me and empowered me to see the world in through a loving way. And I want to tell that story to as many people as I can. And if they want to follow, awesome. If they find another way, fine. I'm okay with that. You don't have to be wrong for me to be right.
Yeah.
You know, your understanding of whether you understand Muhammad or, you know, like we've talked about, if you find peace and contentment and love through that, awesome.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you what I've found, and I'm going to invite you to walk with me. And I think we could have some fun along the way. And even if you say, you know what, I'm with you until, okay, come along until.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'll follow you sometimes too. And that's the key, the humility to say, I don't have it all figured out. I'll try your path for a little while. And I'm confident my convictions are strong enough to not be threatened. Right? Faith, a lot of people say faith, you know, the opposite of faith is doubt. I think the opposite of faith is certainty. There's very few things more dangerous in this world than someone who's certain.
Yeah, when I was trying to get sober, and it was like, well, you have to find a God if you're going to stay sober. And someone had said to me, what about this idea that, I think I might have already said this, but there is a God, I'm not it. You know, that's enough of
that's
a
door.
That's
a good place to start.
A good place to start. You know, if there is a God, I sure as heck am not it. And so, you know, looking at the stars, looking at nature, even just a willingness to believe that maybe there's something bigger than yourself is an opening to peace and serenity, because when you feel like you have to be in charge of the universe, that's a very anxious way to live. Mm-hmm. And I'm a therapist, you know, and over the years, you know, 20 years of being a therapist, I think one disservice of therapy sometimes can be that we're really good at helping an individual exert more and more personal control and kind of over their own life. Like, we help people figure themselves. It's a valuable, wonderful tool in the toolbox. And you can incorporate faith and all that stuff into it. But it is very like individualistic. So as you're trying to, as you're wrestling with fertility, as you're dealing with grief, as you're trying to change jobs or dealing with depression or anxiety, I feel like in our culture in general, there's just a lot that's like on our shoulders. You know, just do these 5 different things and you can figure out how to like wrestle yourself into a life that meets all your personal needs. And that sometimes that just sets us up for like dissatisfaction and loneliness and isolation. And, you know, the being a part of a faith community or having the structure, the something of a faith can quiet down a lot of the internal stuff. Like, you know, God's will, not mine. I mean, if you believe that, it's very soothing, and it can feel really good to wake up in the morning and say, help me get out of my own way. You know, I don't have to wrestle so much in this life. I can try to be a tool or a vehicle for something that's flowing through me. Like, if I believe that God is love, you know, how do I tune into that station? How do I say, work through me today to do your miracles, whatever that might look like. And that actually probably brings people more peace than this idea of like, you know, modern day therapy is a little bit like, change your thoughts. Like, what am I thinking? Okay, let me restructure that thought. Let me make sure that I go for a walk and do my 10 minutes of meditation. And, you know, all that stuff is important, but it's also very self-directed. We just live in a very self-directed society in general.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I think worship, you know, if you can, for me, worship coming together, for us, it's Sunday at 9:30. And I know that there's antiquated...
Didn't you guys have church at Schwiebert Park the other day?
Yeah, we did.
That's so cool.
We got together with 2 other churches. That was such a cool thing. So Greg Hampton at the House Church is another downtown Rock Island church. Mason Parks is a pastor at Gaines Chapel AME Church out in East Moline. The 3 of us have been friends for a long time, and kind of independently of each other. And then recently we've been being more intentional about getting together as a group. And then we bring our congregations together. And we didn't actually work that day. We didn't actually worship. We just met in Schwiebert Park and brought food, and we kind of talked. We just had guided conversations. And then at the end of that, we invited people to put down their name, and we're in the process of trying to get people to connect outside of that moment. So that was a really cool thing.
Tell me next time you do that, because
Yeah.
I would love to do something like that. Like even just being outside makes
Yeah.
church feel
Yeah.
cool, or even like inviting churches, maybe even different faiths in the community, and like all sitting together at a big table or somewhere where you're just like sharing food and talking about faith, and that would be super cool.
Yeah. So that's, for me though, that what worship is tuning the radio, finding that frequency again. Because over the course of the week, there's a lot of things that nudge it, right? Like that get you out of tune, that get you out of sync. And if we can come back together and retune, that's going to help. I think that's a helpful thing in my life. And church, too much of church, I believe, has become the sort of fallen into the same traps of like consumer culture of we've got to put on a really good show that people enjoy, that gets you going, and then and so much effort is into that, right? To me, worship is retuning. Like worship is practice, right? Life is the game. Like a lot of churches think that the worship is the game, and we've got to get ready for the game every Sunday, right? Go to sports metaphors, right? And so we've got to put all of our work into having that game in this moment, and that's what the focus is. To me, worship is the practice. We're practicing what it looks like to get someplace better, but all week is the game, right? It's being in the world, serving your neighbor, serving your community, being kind. Like the mission field to me is not just, and it's not just an evangelism of like proselytizing to get people to come. It's you're going to, I think about our little congregation, how many of us are working for healthcare fields, or doing justice work, or volunteering other places, or in education fields, or doing things that are serving others. And hopefully, a lot of us are retired too, or doing things that are, can you go out in the world and do good in the world? And then we come back together and we refresh and we renew and let's go do it again.
Yeah. I like that analogy. It's just a kind of touching base with yourself, retooling, getting a little grounded, recommitting to the way that you want to show up in the world, kind of checking yourself if you've been full of frustration, or and having a community of people who are there trying to do the same thing.
And they're happy you're there.
Yeah.
And they miss you if you're not.
Yes.
Right? I mean, so many people
that's how I feel like when I
right?
do go with my kids to church, and they've made relationships, and I'm always struck by how much all the congregants there like love my kids, or if my kids have had health things, they're all praying for them. And I'm just so, Jim and I, like our Sunday mornings are just so special to us because we work all week. I think that is like probably the story of a lot of people our age. It's like, oh, Sunday mornings, that's when we get to chill on the couch for a second and drink some coffee. And if my parents will take the kids to church, like that is our foundation of our family. And when we like really connect, or we're running around doing stuff, but
I mean, humanity,
it's like
we have
church on Friday night.
Yeah. We've run ourselves ragged in so many ways, right?
Yeah.
And claiming Sabbath, right? And you might not name it that, but God commanded us to take Sabbath, right? Like Sabbath of rest. People, I feel guilty about not doing anything. Now, Sabbath rest is really important. It is doing something, right? Sabbath is vitally important to our well-being, to our humanity. And Sabbath is one of those things that it's not just, Hobby Lobby's closed on Sunday, No, it's not just, it's not a marketing ploy, right? I wouldn't go to Hobby Lobby anyway for a lot of different reasons, but it's Sabbath is taking a time to reconnect, and it's incredibly important. And if for some people, if going to church isn't that, then why would you? Yeah, of course not. But I think Sabbath is important, right? And I think community is important. And that's why, creating space is part of what I try to do, think about it. It's hard, but like, can you create spaces like Friday night church, is that something that you could do, or gathering at other times, but having, I think, people that you're willing to grow with, discuss with, I think community is important, and I think Sabbath is important. And we have these lives that are so full of busyness that it's so hard to find it all. And that's why I've never, I'm not like, if people don't go to church, I get it. Or if they say, I haven't been in so long, and they're like apologetic about it, I'm like, it's okay. I'm glad you're here now. I'm just happy in this moment we're here. Mm-hmm. It's okay. You're
not judging them.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, where have you been? It's been a little while, And here's the problem. Some people might, because we're not perfect. And there's still some people that might, or jokingly say it. And, people say uncaring things sometimes, or they say things that, and churches are not perfect, right? And our church is not perfect. There are people that might say something they think is well-meaning, but is received negatively, or they might, we might forget somebody and you never know, do I reach out? Mm-hmm. And then it's nagging, or if you don't reach out, then you forgot about me, right? And like, so no community is perfect. I try not to use the metaphor of family, because I don't think that's always helpful.
Feel good to everyone, or there could be different things that have happened in families.
Yeah, but I think community, because we're not family, right? I mean, we should treat each other with respect and care and dignity, and again, acknowledging how we have failed that in the past, and I think especially of, LGBTQ kids. Like, so much of what I'm trying to create now in the church and with our affirming congregations, and because it's not just me, it's Santina Poor at Hope, it's Tyler Yost at Church of Peace, it's Rich Hendricks at MCC, it's I shouldn't have started that, because now I'm going to forget folks. It's Lindsay Svetlik, right?
Yeah.
There's and we're trying to create a place where, and I listened to like Adam's interview, and I think about, and I don't want to talk about him when he's not here, I just think about people that struggle. Mm. There's enough struggle in the world. I don't want to add on. I don't want to do... The Methodist Church, we have 3 simple rules. The first, do no harm. And I think about how much harm churches have done, especially to little queer kids.
Yeah.
Right? That are fearful, and now they're already confused, and they're already... being a kid, being an adolescent, going through puberty is hard enough, and now there's all this other stuff. The idea that there have been churches that have made that harder and more scary breaks my heart, and it upsets me. And if I can create a community where that kid feels safe, and not just that kid, but also the immigrant kid, the kid that's come from who knows what. And, I've heard stories from some of our immigrant families. We've got 2 families. We've got families in our church from Burma, and from Tanzania, from Burundi. We had a girl from Burma that was born in Thailand in a refugee camp, and born in Burundi, literally opposite ends of the world, met in Rock Island, got married in our church. Their families now come together and worship. I once saw their 2 dads, co-fathers-in-law, sitting down at a table with an open hymnal, learning each other's language because they both knew Amazing Grace.
Ugh.
Right? One was teaching one Korean, the other was teaching the other Swahili. And they had Amazing Grace opened in between them. And that was the connective tissue. right? If that kid can find a place that they're going to be welcomed and maybe struggle with language and but still be welcomed and embraced, I want that more than anything. And again, that's what we're trying to do. And it's not just us. I don't want this to be a commercial for Two Rivers. St. John's is doing this kind of work. Church of Peace is doing that kind of work. There are so many little congregations that are doing this kind of work, this kind of community, that are in the world.
But for
they're
anyone
not perfect,
who is listening, who maybe grew up in church as a kid and then has kind of walked away from that, and then maybe through the pandemic got disconnected from this in-person type of stuff, and that those places do provide such a wonderful opportunity for connection. They can help to combat the loneliness that we all feel and the disconnection. They so help with like mental health, and so that those places exist in Rock Island, that we have all sorts of faith traditions, and that whatever type you're looking for, like there are places to go and people to connect with, and people can jump around churches and shop around, see what messages and kind of vibe fits with you the best.
Yeah.
And but that probably being connected in that way is really powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see your group of friends on Facebook and stuff, and I'm always like, oh my gosh, look at them. They're like in a little community. And I'm like, I don't have any friends. I just, and maybe that's also because I've lived here my whole life. So it's like I got my parents and my husband and my children. I have a best friend that I talk to on the phone a lot, but, you get disconnected from that community of like in real life friendship and connection, and it looks very appealing.
Yeah. Well, we're blessed with a lot of really good friends, and the church community and friend community, there's a lot of overlap. They're not one and the same. Always been tricky. Like, I don't want you to think that to be my friend, you have to go to my church. But if you're my friend, I would love it if you did. It would be fun. But then there's, I'm your pastor, I'm your friend. What does that mean? And there's, it can get complicated, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not magic. Like I'm just a dad who gets mad sometimes and gets lazy sometimes and swears too much and, drinks every once in a while. And I mean, I'm just a guy. I'll go and sit with you and have a cup of coffee, or go to Reb and have a beer and we can chat, or, go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking in this world, I mean, I don't know, like how do we fill ourselves with love for all the people? Like, there's just so much going on in the world. I don't know if it's a unique time or not. I'm sure every generation is like, oh, this time is really challenging or something. But I don't know, like sometimes the world can just feel really scary and overwhelming. And there's so many issues going on in the world, in Sudan and Gaza, just they're going to maybe overturn gay marriage in Iowa. Like, it feels overwhelming. And how do you both dig into your community and take care of people? But like, are we supposed to love people? How do you love people that feel differently than you? And how are you, as you're kind of resisting, I'm going to just visualize the lady who started the case to overturn gay marriage in the name of Christianity. How am I supposed to love her? Kim, I think her name's Kim.
The one who's defending the sanctity of marriage, who's been divorced 3 times.
Yeah.
When Jesus specifically said, don't do that. Yeah.
So like, how do we, because I think there can be this victim oppressor, and we think Jesus is going to be holding hands with those who are vulnerable, but also there is humanity in the imperialist, in the colonizer, in the, that's a human being. And maybe they have their own childhood. I listened to a whole thing today on Laura Loomer on the Daily, and I was like, found myself after the episode feeling like deep compassion for Laura Loomer. I mean, hearing about her history growing up and kind of thinking through, like, how might she have come to feel the way she does about the world and about vulnerable groups of people. And I don't agree with anything that she says or does, but I could feel in myself a curiosity and a compassion toward, oh my God, what has her life experience been? are we supposed to love everyone?
Yeah. Well, I want to love the sinner and hate the sin. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I love them, but I disagree with their lifestyle and the choices that they've made.
But if we do that, aren't we just doing what was done to Adam?
Yeah,
and,
absolutely. So that's so yes. Okay. I think God's ultimate will is reconciliation for all people. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. And then the next question is, who is your neighbor?
Every single person that lives on this planet.
Yeah.
And maybe aliens. I don't know.
And so trying to figure that out. But that's the harder.
I mean, aliens from outer space.
The easy answer is love your neighbor.
Yeah.
The harder answer is, who is your neighbor? Because we were on one level, and I was just listening to a podcast about they call it trolleyology, right? Like deep philosophical questions. And like my neighbor, we're evolved to care about the people in our circle. And that's normal. You can't be human and care as much about somebody on the other side of the world as you do the people in your circle. We should, and like intellectually we can. And I think we should constantly be pushing ourselves too. But there is an element of immediacy in relationship that we can't pretend isn't there, right? So when I love my neighbor, asking that question, who is my neighbor? Yeah, the easy answer is everybody's your neighbor. Well, that's why Jesus told a story about, the one who showed mercy was the one that actually everybody in the room that heard that story would have thought that person was the worst person. That was the Samaritan would have been the reviled, the other. But it was the Samaritan that was the one who showed mercy. And so he was challenging our understanding of neighbor. And that's what Christianity should challenge, our understanding of neighbor, and constantly be opening it up and widening it. But it's really hard to consider some people your neighbor when they're actively working against your right. I mean, and this is the paradox of tolerance, right? I am tolerant, but I am intolerant of intolerance, right? So,
oh my gosh. So like I'm like Michael Scott from The Office. So I think of ideas and so I have written up in my head for years this cartoon that I want someone to draw and put into the New Yorker. But it's a woman, kind of maybe a stereotypical like liberal woman with like black glasses and maybe like cool bangs, and she's wearing a neat outfit, and she's talking to a gentleman who's got one cowboy boot up against a fence with his shoulders over it and maybe a piece of straw coming out of his mouth. And he's saying to her, you sure are mighty intolerant of the intolerant. Mm. And kind of that is like, as we are feeling our own intolerance, it's just like mirror images. Mm-hmm. And we can think that like, well, our intolerance is justified and theirs isn't. Mm-hmm. But this is complicated to me. But I have noticed it's gotten better. I try to work really hard on it. But like, let's say when George Floyd died, I felt extremely intolerant of anyone who didn't see someone else's humanity and could feel it in my body. Like, I want to squash your ideas. Mm-hmm. If you disagree with me, like, I need to change your mind. I have to force you into like submission to, and I'm not sure that that's that helpful, that it really changes anyone's heart, I don't even know what I'm saying now, but this idea, I so resonate with that. And like, I feel like I need spiritual help with that. Like,
yeah. And I think it's a miracle, right? I think you need spiritual help. There's a spiritual power that has to, and I think it doesn't happen in argument. It doesn't happen in memes or comment sections. The only place anyone's ever changed your mind, I think, is by having a relationship and connecting with somebody. I think about how I've evolved, say, around LGBTQ issues, right? I was taught a certain thing over the years, but the thing that changed me the most was my friend who came out to me, who I still loved, and realized, well, nothing's actually changed here, right? But until I had that experience, and lots of people have had that experience and it didn't happen, but it's not going to happen without relationship. And I think we can think globally in ways to advocate and ways to organize, and that's important. So we organize like-minded people and we try to pull the levers of power that matter. And I think a Christian should be doing those things. And so we should be organizing and marching and petitioning and doing all these things. And we can't give up on your friend who with a red hat, right? Because you might need to.
Who's my friend with the red hat?
I don't know. Just generally, right? Like
I didn't know you were talking about someone.
No, not you
referenced.
specifically, but like in general, right? You can't give up on somebody that you disagree with, because if you do, where do they go?
Yeah.
To others, right? That will feed the cycle and feed the so if we can stay in relationship and if you can't, right? So this is part of what allyship to me is, right? Being a big, white, middle-aged, middle-class man, I'm not in danger in very many places. So I can use what I can in these places of privilege as much as I can. But then I can also try to stay in contact in the micro level, in the interpersonal stuff. I can keep praying for people. I can still have a conversation with somebody. I can still challenge people here and there, either online or face to face. And I think so. I don't think we let go of those people with whom we disagree, with whom our values seem to clash so distinctly, because ultimately they're decolonization, tearing down patriarchal systems, this kind of stuff does liberate everybody in the end.
And I think
and understanding the stories that people are comfortable in, I think, is really important to help them. In my own sense, I'm not going to argue with them, but if I can understand where they're coming from, then I've at least got a chance to provide alternatives.
Yeah. And I think a fear for everyone is just like, you tear down one patriarchy, you just set up another one. So the humanness of us, I think people who have been maybe leaders in a patriarchy may have some fear that when this system is torn down, what will happen to me? Mm-hmm. Because there hasn't been a lot of compassion. Because I'll see people screaming at JD Vance and I'm also like, ooh, I don't like that either. Like, I don't like it when it's like, F you, and basically like, if I ever had the chance to be in power over you, I would crush you.
Right. And that's because it's happened, right? We've seen that play out.
Yeah.
Lots of countries where there's a revolution that they just flip, right? The oppressed becomes the oppressor, and it happens all the time. I mean, that's part of why I love the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Right? Because it explains that, I think, really powerfully, and like it's bleak.
I also love the Hunger Games.
Because that's, I know people that are like, oh, I hate the last movie. I'm like, well, that was the whole point. Right? Like the ones that once you break the chains, you often put the chains right back on.
I don't even want to talk about Game of Thrones, because I don't know if you got into that series. But
I'm sorry. Anybody that that
was one of the most devastating days of my life, was the series finale of that show.
But then I've rewatched it and I was like, oh, we knew who she was all along. It shouldn't have been a surprise. I mean, I've even had conversations with friends of mine that are like, the patriarchy has to die, and kind of this idea that all these old white men just need to die off and die out. And, but there's something in that language that is like still violent. I don't know. So I actually was like super into the George Floyd stuff. And then I got not canceled or anything, but I didn't agree with like violence. Like, I'm very much a nonviolent person. I don't know. And I had people kind of come at me and be like, but that's because you're privileged. So you've never been in a place to need to use violence in order to, obviously we would use violence if someone was like, but to preemptively go out and hurt someone in order to send a message about, I could never get on board with like violence against a police officer, like just for the point of I don't know. So it just, because I think then you're talking about a system that is still going to perpetuate the same structures. It's just going to be different people pulling the strings. And
I can't remember the philosopher who talked about when you're setting up a society, you almost want to work with people in this blind way where you're not advocating for your own interests, but you're saying if your child was dropped into this society and you had no idea who they were going to turn out to be, whether they'd be this power group or this disadvantaged group, and it might be in a time when we don't know it could involve robots. Like I keep referencing back to Atticus's episode, but that you would want to set up a system that is blind to how the dice of your life are going to roll out, and a system that can respect in this way. I don't know.
And not to bring it back. So here's the thing. This to me is what the kingdom of God is that place where what Jesus did was present this third way, right? There is those who wanted violent overthrow of Rome, and there were some that just wanted the status quo of Rome. And those seem to be oppositional forces, right? You could either just abide and capitulate and kowtail to the emperor and worship the emperor, or you could want violent overthrow and insurrection. And what Jesus offered was a third way of saying, no, I'm not participating in that, and I'm also not participating in that. Oh. And is that what to me, what Christianity should be, and I think you might argue a lot of religion, is can we create something that is not this violent system, and it's also not this violent overthrow? Is there a peaceful nonviolence? Is there a non-aggression? Is there a community building that is based on generosity and plenty, not based on an economic of plenty, not an economic of scarcity, a power structure of mutuality, not a power structure of hierarchy? And that's real. That to me is the ultimate vision of what we're supposed to be going toward. It's really hard for me to see it because I still live in these systems. My prayer is that we figure it out.
Was Jesus hated by both those who wanted the status quo and those who wanted the violent overthrow?
Yeah.
Like, was he considered a pacifist, or?
I don't know if he would have been considered a pacifist, but what's also interesting is in his disciples, he had a tax collector and a zealot. Mm-hmm. So he had the bluest blue and the reddest red in his group. And yeah, he was hated by both. That's why what happened then was this unholy alliance of power that wanted him out.
Like the most dangerous thing to the system is love. You
Absolutely.
know, it's in the middle, and oh gosh, yeah.
It's not even in the middle. It's something completely different. What you're telling me today
is we have a lot to learn from the example of Jesus. Whether you are a religious person or not, whether you're a spiritual person or not, this example of a human being who probably lived. That's pretty true. Like he was alive.
Yeah, right? I mean it's disputed, but yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
and then this thing going on in the society with imperial control and people who wanted to overthrow that, and just very extreme parts of a society being kind of on fire. Yeah. And this middle way, I love that, and kind of a...
And it's Jesus, and it's also the prophets, right? He didn't really invent anything either. He was a part of a long tradition of what Walter Brueggemann called a prophetic imagination. Can we imagine something that is different than the world is today? Can we understand that there are things that are broken? It's easy to say everything's broken. What's harder is to have the prophetic imagination to present something else. And again, can we construct something that's not these other things, consumerism and patriarchy or consumption, and you're right, that's not going to destroy our environment, that's not going to exploit people? Do we have the prophetic imagination to honor Sabbath, to honor everybody as created in the image of God, and take that seriously? Is that something that we can build? And I think a lot of people want to build it, but do you have the imagination to actually get there? And then there's the part, we're not going to do it. You and I aren't going to do it, but maybe we can take us one step closer to it.
Yeah, my dad used to always say, what you do to me, you do to the least of these, you do to me, or something like that. I mean, he's always saying
stuff
stuff
Matthew 22, I believe.
What you do to the least of these, you do to me.
You did to me, yeah.
And that you should always carry that attitude with you. Like, however you're treating the most vulnerable in your society is the way that you would be treating God.
That was the last thing Jesus taught us before he went into in the Gospel of Matthew. The last thing that he taught people before he started the Passion and the Last Supper and the arrest and all of that kind of stuff. It's kind of its own thing. The last thing that he taught people was, in the end, you're going to be judged by how you treated the least of these. And so when I think about heaven and hell, or when I think about judgment, I think it's not about the judgment. It's about what gets judged. And what gets judged is how we treat other people, how we treat ourselves, and how we treat others, and especially how we treat the least of these. How do you treat the marginalized? How do you treat the houseless? How do you treat the trans kid in your neighborhood? How do you treat how do you treat the racist jerk that you can't stand? You still need to treat them with some dignity and respect. It's a different kind of treatment, right? It's different, but there's still humanity there. And if you can see the humanity in everybody, that's so important. And if you can't do that, then we're lost.
Well, and just how we set up, like, what is true torture in this world, so it's like, I might be like, oh my gosh, this person is really living in poverty, but they might have a lot of love and connection. And I'm not trying to minimize
Absolutely.
the impact of poverty. And then I might have a neighbor who is just so filled with fear and hate. And I often think, like, that would be a worse way to have to exist. Mm-hmm. That might feel worse. Like, he might need more of my compassion because there's more isolation there. There's more disconnection. There's more fear. Some of the poorest people in the whole entire world might feel more joy, not even in America, but in other countries, might feel more joy and happiness and
Absolutely.
love and connection than a very wealthy, isolated person who's just terrified and checking their bank account all the time, or I don't know, but we can make up stories, but
Sure.
I guess that's the place I am, is like, there's so many calls online, and when you listen to a news story, to just be like, we need to squash that part of the society, and it's like, I don't know. Like, if you could have killed Hitler, would you? I mean,
Yeah. That's a Dietrich Bonhoeffer. There's a new movie, not new, it's a few months old now. Bonhoeffer was a German pastor who conspired to help kill Hitler.
I would have wanted to be Hitler's therapist.
Yeah.
I would have wanted to, like, explore the parts of him that showed up as a reaction to all the stuff we experience in life that creates something like that. Mm-hmm. And to have compassion. And obviously, like, maybe I would at the last minute before all the really bad stuff happened, but hopefully you'd be like, how could I have run into that person before it got that way? Or even Donald Trump, like, I feel like there's something going on in his psyche. There's some pain or insecurity. I don't know. Just, how do we have compassion for everyone and still resist?
And still resist, yes. And not do it.
But not hate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. And there's also a type of prayer that most people don't learn about called the imprecatory prayers. They're psalms. They're prayers of curse. Sometimes your prayers are, I'm really mad, curse the wicked, tear down these systems, tear down. But the problem with that, if you're going to tear things down, what are you going to build? Mm-hmm. I'm not deconstruction is wonderful. It's important and in general, but my question is, okay, so then what's next? And that's a lot more complicated.
Well, and I like Jonah Goldberg. Do you listen to him?
Mm-mm.
He's kind of like he's conservative. He's more of an old school conservative, but he talks a lot about the founders of our country and the things they believed in, the principles that form things, and like history and politics. But he kind of talks about, like, the cycles of how in times when you have an authoritarian government, sometimes it is the preceding liberal ideals, almost like socialist ideals. And then, like, Stalin was a socialist, but they can become oppressive as well. I'm not going to, you would have to listen to him.
Well, but, even like Hamilton, right? There's a line, revolution is easy, governing is hard.
Yes. So even as we're kind of wanting to tear something down right now and maybe replace it with a different system or something, like, I don't even think I would like that system because I so deeply value my freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be in a communal society, but I also want some level of freedom of idea or I don't know. Rob, sometimes I just start rambling when this goes on.
No, I mean, and I get it. And I think that's...
But I don't want to, I also am like, if the most extreme liberals in the country were to kind of suddenly take over and now we all had to live under what they wanted, I wouldn't like that either.
Right. There is a certain oppression of that, right?
Exactly.
And groupthink. Groupthink is a powerful thing, and it happens to a lot of folks.
Yes. So I love, like, I feel like what I'm really going to take away, I want to like go read the Bible now. I want to be like, so what did Jesus do when this person was, trying to be imperialist and this person was kind of wanting to overthrow, and how do you stay centered where you can have curiosity and compassion and connection with others. And one thing I've had a hard time with on this podcast, I don't know if it just comes across through my face, but like I am a more liberal person in general, is finding more conservative people to talk to me. So I've reached out to different folks, but I haven't, it's like crickets. Like maybe to them I have a punchable face. I don't know. I'm like, so if
your face is fine, it's wonderful, but I don't think that's it's.
But if you know any conservative thought people, let me know, because I feel like that is the.
And I think we need conservative people in the world. But I think right now there's a crisis of conservatism. That's a cruelty. Conservatism shouldn't be cruel. And for a lot of folks it is.
What I wouldn't give for George Bush right now.
Right?
And I
compassionate
disagreed with
dead.
A lot of
and it's not dead. It's at least a lot of the leadership, it's dead. And yeah, I mean, I'm not a political scientist, so I don't want to talk too much about this kind of stuff. But I think what we've seen is a shift toward polarization, and a shift away from wanting a common good, even if we disagree on some things. Conservatives and liberals need to exist because we can debate about tax codes and foreign policy. When we start debating over the humanity of people, that's no longer a political conversation. That's bigger.
Well,
scarier.
I told you I have one friend I talk to on the phone almost every morning. If we recorded it, it would be the most depressing way to start your day, because I'm like, why are we talking about this again? But we do. But I said, sometimes I feel like I'm being groomed for cruelty. Mm-hmm. You know how they talk about people being groomed, like just a little.
Social media helps that.
Yeah, but being groomed for not caring about human life or something. So, we're just going to have like a few more police officers on the street, and we're just going to treat a few more segments of the population as though they don't have human rights, and we're going to round these people up and move these people over, and it's like trying to get us used to it. Used to dehumanization.
So let's see how far we can go. We'll just take a little bit more. I mean, that's a classic poem of they came first for the right, and then they came for me, and there was nobody left. And I mean, that's trying to figure out if is this time actually unique? And there's moments where I'm like, it feels different.
And even like Gaza, I mean, that's a whole can of worms. Sure. But, do you talk to your kids about all that stuff? Do you and your wife?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And so my husband and I aren't lockstep on every single thing. But I notice in children, if they see something, like I feel like kids have a good barometer for, like, oh my God, that's bad. Like if they see a child suffering or dying.
That shouldn't be controversial.
Well,
right?
But then if you look at it in geopolitical lens, or when all that was first happening, everything just gets so complicated. Yeah. And then it's like, well, put it in the context of this history and these, and it's like, how would you, sometimes it'll go beyond me because I never want to lose touch with my, that humanity that's like, I can still feel a lot of different things. I can hold a lot of different beliefs. But if I see a child who's starving, and in my being, in my heart, it says, I don't like seeing that, and that is wrong, I don't really want to be convinced otherwise. Mm-hmm. But it's like, well, we have to, I don't know if that makes sense, but just staying connected to
Yeah, and that's why we keep telling stories of hope. Keep telling, because there's so many other stories out there. I keep telling stories of love, of keep telling stories of generosity, keep sharing them, keep living them, keep noticing them, because they're there. They're all around. You know, the kingdom of God is all around. I mean, they asked Jesus, "Show, what are the signs? What are the signs?"
Yeah.
He said, "Look around."
Yeah. And then just local politics, like what's going on right now with the
change what you can. I mean, what's the serenity prayer?
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah, Richard Niebuhr, he was a graduate of the seminary I went to.
Oh, really? Is that who the person who wrote that got like adopted by AA?
Yep.
Yeah, it's wow.
Richard Niebuhr, he's one of the great theologians of like mainline Protestantism of the 30s and 40s that talked about like what should the role of the church be in politics, and but he came up with that too.
Well, and I think it's hard because if you take all this love and like we want to take care of people, and you take it to City Hall, and it's like we don't have any money.
Yeah, right.
You know, and then you're running up against
you need people to give us a reality check sometimes.
Yeah, but also it's in the country as a whole, like we do have enough money.
Well,
it's just what are our priorities? How do we do
absolutely.
income redistribution? Should we do it? How do we do it? But then it's just overwhelming. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess, should we all give up? Like, I don't know. It's like, so are you going to go see Bernie Sanders tomorrow night by any chance?
Probably not.
Do you like Bernie?
I have. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think he has a lot of important things to say. I'm not a big crowd rally kind of person, but I'm much more likely to be at the next city council meeting.
Yeah. Are you going to go to the next city council meeting?
I got to double check that, but I think so.
So I've kept you too long, but how is it for you working, running a church downtown? What is it like for your congregants and you as the pastor to kind of interact with the community around you, and including folks who might not be housed? Yeah,
I mean, it's a constant struggle. We get folks coming to our door, not every day, but fairly regularly asking for help. And there's only, like, you can't give money to everybody. I do probably more than I should. I know some panhandlers and unhoused people around the community. You see them at restaurants or see them walking down the street. They know, I'm an easy mark probably, but I'm okay with that. We have our little free pantry. That's just a place, plug that. I'll do that, without hesitation. Just a little box. It's a free pantry. If you want to put food in it, take what you can, take what you need, leave what you can. That's a small thing, but, we try to keep that active. We have a meal every Saturday at our church. So if you're looking to volunteer, just cook food, serve people, get to know folks. It's a community meal, and it really is more than just a soup kitchen. It is a place where people come and are served a hearty meal, not necessarily healthy, but hearty. Chicken casseroles, those kinds of things. A lot of comfort food, but it's a lot of. And then people sit at round tables, right? And there's people there that come just because they know that they're going to have a meal with their friends. But there's some people that are in real need, and we've seen the numbers increase. So we try to do these things as much as we can. I've got a system of when people need housing, we've got a small fund that's getting depleted to help people, pay utility bills, come up with, just get a little. We're not going to pay a full month rent most of the time, but we might get them a little bit closer. Maybe a water bill that's past due, those kinds of things. There's a lot of that those sort of ministries. I mean, and a lot of them are Band-Aids, but you know what? When you're bleeding, you need a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That is, even my parents' church, I think they had someone come in off the street in the midst of a drug overdose.
Yeah.
Like walked up the middle of the aisle and administered first aid. And I love the Rock Island spirit of just that church being like, okay, like, how do we address this? Because it was a little bit scary, and some congregants were kind of like, oh, and, others are like, we need the Narcan, and we're going to,
We had one of the greatest endorsements of my church is a few years ago. We had a guy that came to our church a lot, and then he disappeared for a while. And we kind of got to know him, and And then, he had some people that he would greet every week, and we didn't see him for a while. And then a couple years later, we saw him back again. And we said, "Oh, where have you been? We missed you." And he said, "I've been in jail. But I knew that if I came back here, there'd be people and I'd be welcome." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's the kind of endorsement I want.
Yeah.
Somebody that's, and he's had a lot of struggle, and I didn't fix him. Maybe we could have done more. But just the fact that he said, I knew I could come here and see some people and have a cup of coffee and not be judged. I'm like, that's a 5-star review.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's really a place to keep coming back and keep experiencing love and community support. Yeah. And I think that's really cool. Yeah. And after I met with Christy, I was like, well, why Rock Island? Like, why are we? And I felt bad when I was like, why do we have to take care of the eagles and the turtles? And
oh yeah, no, that's a good point.
But then I was kind of doing some research, and there was a study that came out about 10 years ago that, because our community has a lower median income than a lot of our neighbors. We're either the lowest, or it's like us in East Moline, but significantly lower than, let's say, Bettendorf. So if you look at the amount of funds in our community that people have to give away, we just have less. But I was actually, so why do all these services sit here? And I was... there was a big research article out. It was in like the Washington Post in 2015 that they actually did research on generosity and giving. And it's actually people who have less money who are more generous with it. So they give, and the figures are kind of appalling, but really wealthy people give like 1.2% away, but they have so much that 1.2 kind of seems like a lot.
Yeah.
And people who are lower income give away like 3.5% or something. And so in that context, I was like, well, maybe it does make sense that it's Rock Island, because maybe people, and actually this building, it belongs to Jose and Sarah, who run the Pancake Factory. Yeah. So I rent from them. So as I was getting to know them and going to rent this space and telling them about it, and like, oh, it's all about Rock Island, and they love being in Rock Island, but they didn't actually grow up here. They moved here, and they've run restaurants in other cities. And Jose was telling me that like the coolest thing about running that restaurant is how people in the restaurant pay for each other's meals, take care of each other, buy people food. And he said, like, you'll never know who's who, though. So in Rock Island, you don't know if that person has a lot to give or has nothing to give. And there's this like flowing back and forth of generosity that he said has really been quite shocking based on the other places he's lived. And so I hope to get them on the podcast someday. But,
oh, that'd be great. I'm there. If you want to run into me, go there on Sunday morning at between 6:30 and 8. I'm there every single Sunday.
Well, maybe he might be one of the people they've watched buy someone else breakfast, or
there's people that know. Yeah. And it's I love Jose.
And it's not even like a person, someone buying breakfast for a person, quote unquote, in need. It's just like, oh, I'll take care of their, It's a great meal and a great place, great staff. And they actually, gosh, we could talk more about that. And they'd hosted a meal at our place one time. They just wanted to do it. And we invited our Saturday meal site people that come as guests and the volunteers. And they were actually able to have a meal together that was catered by Jose and Sarah, and they didn't charge us a dime. Oh, cool.
It was very cool. It was one of the cooler moments. And then we had communion. It was a really neat thing. But
that's awesome. Well, I look forward to getting to know you better. I'm like, okay, Jim and I should go to your church one Sunday with the kids and check it out. And
we love it.
I don't know if we'd be regular attendees, but we could like show up once.
We love it anytime. Yeah. And again, if you or anybody for that matter just wants to get have a cup of coffee and talk, I'd say Cool Beans. Now I'm probably more at Vibrant because it's just open later, but or go to Radical and bend an elbow there. Or
I literally go to Hy-Vee with people because there's just
I go
nowhere.
To Hy-Vee too, yeah.
There's when you're trying to go to coffee, because if you go to Holy Grinds, which I go to also, but if you want to have a little bit more of a private conversation,
or a little bit more comfortable chair too.
Yes, because those are high tops, but it's anything you say is kind of like in the whole room.
Yeah,
you're just like
there's no privacy there.
So sometimes I'll go to Hy-Vee. But I also am like, I really want to meet with the manager of Hy-Vee to be like, why is your bathroom so dirty? Like, I don't understand. Because I've been in the Hy-Vees that have like, because I work in Davenport. Sometimes my husband, if you go to like the Bettendorf Hy-Vee, there's like a nail salon in there, and you can buy shoes. And
that's Bettendorf.
I know, but I'm like, it shouldn't matter how clean the bathroom is, though. I understand we don't get the nail salon, but I'm thinking of volunteering to just be like, would you like me to give this bathroom like a good once over, and then it'll just be, like a Saturday Night Live, like, dear Rock Island Hy-Vee, please explain to me why no one has wiped that spot around. But not to throw shade on the Rock Island Hy-Vee, but
I'm just glad it's there. I know there were rumors about when the one in Moline closed. I was like,
that they were going to get rid of
well,
ours?
I think everybody was afraid, that would, when they closed that one that they just renovated, why not this one? But
yes,
luckily it's not.
Yeah. Where would I get a Whitey's chipper at 10 p.m. after I put my kids to bed when I'm like, no chippers for you, but I'm going to go get one. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, I really have enjoyed meeting you. Is there anything else that you want anyone to hear, or? No, I don't think we've talked about Did I ask you too many questions?
Yeah, no,
about God?
This is the conversation. I love this kind of conversation. I'm open to it.
Okay.
I'm open for it anytime.
I'm like, explain God to me.
Sundays at 9:30, you can hear me more, but, Pulpit Fiction, or just, send me an email and see if you'd be interested in meeting. Somebody not that long ago emailed me out of the blue, and they're like, I heard that you were doing this. Can we meet for coffee? And I said, yes, absolutely. Because that's an incredible act of courage. I think people that come to church for the first time are so incredibly brave, and I always want to honor that. Anybody that wants to come and talk to me about this kind of stuff, I know how difficult it can be. I honor that and respect it, and I'm absolutely humbled whenever anybody wants to come to me for this kind of thing. So it's always an honor.
Also, when we were little, we had to dress up for church. Do you have to get dressed up for your church, or is it like, pretty business
it's
casual?
It's t-shirts and
t-shirts.
I'm dressed in jeans and a t-shirt right now. If you came on Sunday, nobody would side-eye you. You might
I think
see
that can be a
tie.
barrier sometimes, too, just like how fancy
I don't
is
think
this?
you even see ties anymore for the most part. I used to wear a tie. I don't even anymore. It's casual, traditional. So you'll sing hymns, and it'll be old in a lot of ways, but it's also pretty casual and laid back.
Yeah, I'm giggling because I'm remembering, like, when I was little, we all had to get dressed up.
Yeah, no.
We had to wear dresses.
Some people like to, and that's fine, but there's no.
But my mom tells a story, like, we get to church, and I'm a little kid, and I do a cartwheel, and I don't have any underwear on. And she's like, okay. Oh my God, you're not wearing any underwear. I was really little, so I'd gotten myself dressed and just forgot that element. So
probably won't see that on a Sunday, but it's a pretty laid back group.
Yeah.
And
some of my best memories actually are church trips in high school, going to, but it was like the nature part of it and the friends, but going to Boundary Waters, doing canoe trips, like, I don't know, it was really powerful. And, my dad was always there, canoeing, and I don't know. It was.
Well, on the 7th, we're going to have church outside again, just in our parking lot. We're not going to the park. Just in our parking lot. So you don't even have to come in the doors. You can come on the
September
7th, and it'll be outside.
I'm going to be in Las Vegas.
Oh.
The opposite of church. But, isn't it Sin City?
Yeah, Sin City, absolutely. Yes. I wasn't going to say that.
Otherwise, I would totally come. Yeah. And, Well, I so appreciate you. I'll let you get out of here.
All right.
I'm sure you have other stuff to do, but I enjoyed talking to you, and I'm sure we'll connect again.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rob.
Thanks, Annika.
All right. I don't know what time it is. It was like 2 hours. That's pretty standard.
Yeah. Because we didn't get started at 1, so It probably was about 2 hours. Wow.
Yeah, time flies when you're having a good...
Bye.